Okay, this is going to be an interesting one. Okay, guys, right, what you're about to hear is going to be very serious and possibly potentially upsetting to anyone who's going to listen to it. We've got a guest with us who's going to share her story. Her name is Peggy, and she's an author. She's written a book, a memoir about what she experienced. Peggy's actually with us now, and we'll be chatting to Peggy in just a moment about her story. Now, guys, please don't watch this unless you're of a certain age, because what you're about to hear can be quite distressing and upsetting. But on another angle, it's very important that we sort of talk about these types of subjects and what we're going to go into. I only know a little bit about Peggy's story, and I was just speaking to you then, one of Peggy, saying I don't really know the depth of what you're going to go into. I've just got a sort of summary, a blurb of what happened. But you're going to share your story with us. So before we continue, this is just for legal reasons. Do you give full consent to share your story on this YouTube channel? Yeah,
Yes. Mhm.
perfect. Okay. Remember, guys, this video is not edited in any way, shape, or form. What you're about to hear is done in real time, and I'm speaking to Peggy as a real human being. And what you're about to hear is going to be very interesting. So, with that said, get ready for this because we're going to get into this story. I'm a bit nervous, to be honest, because when I read the blurb, I was like, okay, I could relate to a little bit about it, but the more I looked into it and I started researching you, Peggy, I started to realise that there's a lot more depth to this story, and the best way to hear it is from the horse's mouth, which is basically you, because only you know what you experienced. Again, we're going to get into it now. Again, guys, this is not being edited in any way. It's completely live recorded. It's not being broadcast live, but it's not going to be filtered, edited, or any way, shape, or form. And one thing I'd say to you, Peggy, try not to use certain words that might be triggering to YouTube's algorithm, because they don't like it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. All right, here we go. So with that said, let's crack on. So let's go back to the beginning. I can relax now. We're recording now, okay? So the best thing to do, Peggy, is kind of just start really from the beginning. So what was life like as a 5-year-old little girl? Can you remember that? What was life like then?
Oh, I sure can. Yeah. Life was pretty chaotic when I was a little girl. My father and my mother separated when I was a baby, and my father was never involved in my life. So there wasn't visitation or child support or anything like that. He remarried and had two children and focused on that new life. And my mother dropped out of school in 10th grade because she was pregnant. So she never went to college, and basically, earned money through cleaning houses, mainly waitressing, but she did other things as well. So there was poverty. There was another child that my mother had. So I had a sister, and then my mother had a son that she had to give up for adoption because she said she couldn't afford to feed another mouth. We moved a lot. So life was rough, but I was just wired as a very resilient child. So I found ways to find joy in life through playing with my friends. And, back then, it was the kids were sent outside to play and you make sure you come home before it's dark type of thing. And so I spent most of my waking moments outside in the neighborhood playing with kids. But life began to change when we moved to California.
Mm.
So when I was 6 years old, we moved to California, and in part because my mother was very depressed, and she was brought up in a loveless home. Her parents were together, but there was just not much love. There was a lot of neglect, some abuse. And my mother was exposed to things. She was sexually assaulted, she was molested. Um, she had a very, very rough upbringing. And she also was very unlucky in love, a lot of heartbreak. She would get attached to men very quickly. And then when it wouldn't work out, she would become very, very depressed. And so our move to California was her attempt at a fresh start, get away from the heartache from where we lived in Pennsylvania. And a friend of hers had come back to Pennsylvania to visit and told her how great California was and she should come out there. So when I was 6 years old, we moved to Los Angeles. And she had a job waiting for her at a restaurant as a waitress. They called them waitresses back then. I know they're servers now, but back then we called them waitresses. Um, and this is kind of what happens next is kind of what lays the groundwork, I believe, looking through it with a therapeutic lens, because I'm a therapist as well as an author, that she was really wounded, a very wounded person. She was a teen mom, a teen bride, never had an opportunity to really live life before being introduced to motherhood and having that responsibility. And she was very wounded and very vulnerable, and was brought up in a small town of 3,000 people, a coal mining town. So quite naive in a lot of ways. So what ended up happening was a man wormed his way into our lives and basically kept us captive for about 2 years. There was domestic violence. My sister and I were hit with the belt when, on a whim, my mother was beaten, sometimes very badly. And after 2 years, we escaped that violent man and fled to Sacramento. That was as far as we could get. I mean, my mother literally took us to the airport,
Mm.
handed the money at the counter to the clerk, and said, "How far can we get with this amount of money?" And that's as far as we could get was Sacramento.
Peggy, can we just rewind? Because you're giving a lot of
Yeah,
information here.
yeah,
And I always find this, when people are sharing the story, they say it really quick. And I
yeah.
understand that because you've just
Hmm.
given a lot of information already about that.
Yes.
So you said your mum was very young. So when she had children, because I know you said you've got a sister and
Hmm.
you had a brother, but because she couldn't support him financially, she gave him up for adoption. So
Yeah.
when you say your mum was young, how old were you? Are you the oldest child?
I'm the youngest.
You're the
So my
youngest.
sister and I are a year apart. Yeah, she's a year older than me.
So how old was your mum when she had your sister?
Uh, 18.
Yeah, it's young, that isn't it?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
still,
And
yeah,
she had another pregnancy before her with my biological father, but she had a miscarriage.
yeah.
And so with that pregnancy, she dropped out of school.
All right,
Yeah,
so
and
she
then
was,
then
yeah,
they ended up getting married. And then she got pregnant with my sister, and then a year later had me. So it was, three pregnancies in a very short period of time.
that's hard for an 18,
Yeah.
19, 20. And,
Yeah.
your dad was with your mum at the time, obviously. But can you remember your dad then?
Yes. So I did according to my mother, there was a couple of visits from my dad,
Mm.
but I don't remember them when I was really little. And then before we moved to California, my mom thought it would be prudent for my sister and I to visit him before leaving. So we spent the night, one night, with him. And then we moved back to Pennsylvania when I was 12. And I saw him once then.
Yeah,
Went to dinner at his house, but he just really didn't show any interest in me. I mean,
yeah,
I remember having dinner, and I remember we had spaghetti and meatballs, and we ate. He asked me what grade I was in, how I was doing in school, and then retired to the living room and watched the Rockford Files. I
yeah,
remember that,
yeah.
just really no, not much interest at all in me.
And what?
And so, yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
well, there's loads of questions. So I'm just trying to, because I'm trying to get the big
Yeah.
picture here. Okay, I hope you don't mind. Okay,
No, I don't mind.
so your mum's got this. She's suffering, and actually you said you're a
Hmm.
therapist because you understand what suffering is. So
Yeah.
because it wasn't necessarily because she was a young mom, there was more to it than that. You said there was abuse
Hmm.
that happened to her,
Hmm.
which obviously affected her. Um,
Hmm.
she's not emotionally. developed because of what's happened to her. She's got the trauma that's completely reshaped her life. Then she
Yes.
has children. Um, she's got no sense of identity because of the trauma. Again, you know all these things, but just for the
Yes.
audience, so they can sort of make sense of it. And then your mum's
Mhm.
carrying this trauma, this demon, whatever word you want to use it. The terminology is trauma, isn't it? The and so she thinks I need to sort of start off fresh. So if I change the area, I can start my life over. But that never. It's an inside job, in it, Becky. It doesn't matter if you go to the moon.
Yes, it is. Wherever
It's
you go, there you are.
yeah, it's an inside job. But you people think, oh, if I move to the other side of the country, I'll be all right. Things will change,
Mhm.
but it's not. But so then your mum moves because she
Mhm.
wants to. She wants to change. She doesn't want to feel like this. She wants the best for her kids. Then she moves with
Mhm.
you and your siblings, and then she gets a job as a waitress. And then this guy, she meets this guy now. So let's talk about this guy. This guy comes into her life. And how old are you at the time when this man comes?
Uh, Nearly 7 by that point. We'd been out there for a few months, so I was nearly 7. My sister
Yeah.
was 8. And what happened was my mom was at work, and apparently she collapsed. I learned this later, but the day that she collapsed at work, this man showed up at our house, and we didn't have a babysitter. My mother said she couldn't afford to have a babysitter, so my sister and I stayed home alone. And she told us always keep the door locked. If anybody knocks, you say who is it, and you don't let any strangers in. Basic stuff.
And how
And
old,
so,
sorry, how old were you when you were babysitting yourself?
oh, I mean, we were set 6, 7,
Oh,
8, 9, 10. Yeah, yeah,
that's,
yeah.
and
We never had a babysitter. Mm-mm.
did you not
We
have,
had we had him when we were really little, but not about 6 years old and on. No babysitter.
you were in the house
Yeah,
on your own at that age?
that's right. That's right. We
It,
cooked for ourselves. We bathed ourselves. We got ourselves ready for school in the morning because my mom worked nights and she was always asleep in the morning, so she didn't see us off to school. My sister and I became very sufficient. So at the time, and this is what happens with children in neglectful or abusive homes, is it becomes normalized.
mm,
You don't think it's odd. When I grew up and became a mother, I looked back at that and I thought, holy,
yeah.
that was not okay. But her reasoning was that she just didn't have enough money for that. So she thought, well, I'll just teach my children how to take care of themselves and teach them, to keep the door locked and things like that. And so that's what we did. And so my mother collapsed at work. And this man, I learned this later, who had been kind of grooming her,
Mm.
but she'd been resisting, apparently told her, I'm going to go and take care of your girls while you're in the hospital. She was taken away by ambulance and given an emergency hysterectomy. And so this man showed up at our door. And I remember it very vividly. It was raining outside, it was nighttime. My sister and I didn't know what to do. He told us, hey, I'm here to take care of you while your mom's in the hospital. So we ended up opening the door and letting him in. And he came in, told us what happened, said, your mom told me to take care of y'all. So we said, oh, well, we didn't know what else we were supposed to do.
And
We're 6 and 7 years old.
you've never seen
Yeah.
this guy before. You've never met him before. Was he a stranger?
He says that we saw him, but I didn't remember seeing him.
Right.
He said, "No, I know your mom. Remember you introduced us, but we didn't remember it." But apparently he claimed we did know him. So he came in and basically took over our lives. We had to uh, clean to his standards. He took us around. He'd previously been in the army. He took us around and showed us, I want things cleaned this way and that way, and he would inspect it. And then my mother came home, and I'm going to fast forward. I'm not going to give you all the details of this because I really want to get into how the cult started. But we basically lived in fear for 2 years. My sister and I didn't know everything that was going on with he and my mom. We never saw him hit her, but we saw the bruises and the blood and all of that when after a beating would happen. Um, and my sister and I were not spared either. We were hit with the belt. One time I just was walking along and turned the corner of a rug with my foot, and I got a beating for that. So he was a malignant narcissist, by far. And so um, my mother started saving money from tips. She started putting money in an old coat in a closet, planning her escape. And so when she finally had enough money, I was homesick that day, and she said, we're leaving. And she had a couple of black trunks that she had bought, and we just packed up those black trunks, jumped in a cab because we didn't have a car. We most of the time in my childhood didn't have a car or a television. So we took a cab to the airport and got on a plane and flew to Sacramento. And then once we got to Sacramento, my mother told my sister and I the horrific things that went on. Apparently, he slept with a gun under his pillow, told her if we tried to leave that he would kill us. He raped women and in front of my mother. There were just horrific things that went on. And so I was happy that we left because I had kind of Stockholm syndrome. I became attached to him like a father figure. But once I heard all of that, that broke the whatever trance I was under, whatever attachment I had to him was completely broken. And I believe that all of this, the way she was raised, um, the way her life started, and then being in this domestic violence arrangement. I don't even want to call it a relationship because it wasn't a relationship. She didn't choose it. He just decided she was his woman and was going to make her his woman, and he did. But I think all of that laid the groundwork for her becoming delusional.
Yeah. Jesus. So a lot of information you're giving us here. So when your mum went to the hospital, how long was she in the hospital for before she came back home?
I'm going to say about 4 days, something like that.
So you're
Yeah,
you're suddenly,
4 days.
this man's just come into your life, into your home,
Hmm.
and you're like, okay, right, I sort of accept it. I don't know what's going on. And then when your
Yep.
mum comes back home, does she sort of explain, just to give you?
No, nothing. My mother, on the one hand, she didn't have a filter and she overshared. I mean, my sister and I knew everything she went through. We knew about all the,
Yeah,
abuse and everything she endured as a child. We knew about the failed relationships and what happened with those. But there were certain things she kept from us, and we really weren't allowed to ask questions. I mean, when we'd ask questions, she'd just say, "No more questions, no more questions." So she came home and yeah, did not sit us down and say, okay, here's the situation. She just came home. And when she was better, she went back to work and we just resumed life. Um, and we weren't really, questioning wasn't something that was allowed in our house.
so the whole dynamics of the house has changed. Suddenly there's this man, this stranger
Yes.
in the house.
Hmm.
So when you're going to school, do you not tell anyone? Do they not tell the teachers? Do your friends, saying there's some fella in our house and I'm not comfortable with it? There was no.
No,
You just sort of
no.
adapted and think, okay, it is.
Yeah, just adapted. At that point, we believed that he was my mother's boyfriend. And we thought, oh, okay, he showed up to take care of us. We didn't know about him. I had this kind of fantasy in my mind that I created that they had fallen in love and
Yeah.
then they had kept it a secret. And that when she collapsed at work, the secret was revealed. So I kind of fantasized as a little girl that that was what was going on. Um, and there, like I said, there was sort of a Stockholm syndrome with me, not
Mm.
with my sister, though. She never formed an attachment with him. And even though he was abusive toward me, one time he shot me with a BB gun just for fun. He was sadistic that way. But he was like a Jekyll and Hyde. Like I said, I got the beating with the belt because I tripped over the rug. He shot me with a BB gun once. But there was another side to him where he would invite me. He brought a little television with him, and he would invite me in the bedroom. He never molested me or touched me or anything like that, but he would invite me to watch Columbo with him and eat popcorn. And I would snuggle up to him like you would snuggle up to a father. And he would tell me stories of his childhood in the ghetto and all of this kind of stuff. And so I needing a father and having that void of not having a father, I formed an attachment to him.
Yeah.
So once that happened, and that happened pretty quickly, there was really nothing to tell. And the other thing I should say is that this went on in all through my childhood, even after the cult started. That when I would go to school, I was a different person. I would leave my chaotic, whatever we want to call it,
Mm.
life behind that I had at home, and I had this life at school, my friends, my teachers, and that was joyful to me.
Mm.
Playing outside was the same thing. I would play outside and it would just be joyful to me, and I would just forget about what was going on. I became very skilled at
Yeah.
just leaving, shutting the door at home, leaving it all in there, and then going outside or going to school and being with my friends. So the secret stayed with me. And now my sister did finally reveal the secret, and there was backlash from that from the man. So, and that's in the book. I won't give that spoiler away, what happens there. But once we got to Sacramento, again, a fresh start. We got an apartment, and my mother found a job, and we settled into life there. And actually, life was not too bad. We eventually moved to this duplex that was, had a big backyard, and my sister and I had our own bedroom because we always, up to that point, we always shared a room with my mom. Just a one-bedroom apartment usually is all she could afford. And this was a two-bedroom. So and she had a big kitchen that she could cook in. But not long after that is when things started to go sideways. So she met another man, and this man was not physically abusive, but he also took over our lives. He moved in with us. He didn't have a job. He basically lived off of us. And but he convinced my mother that the two of them had a calling from God. And we started to go to church 3 times a week. There's this one particular Pentecostal church that we went to. So that was a big change for me. We, up to that point, my sister and I would go to Sunday school sometimes on Sunday. My mother never went to church because she always worked Saturday nights and would have to sleep in on Sunday mornings. And my sister and I went to church on our own. We just walked when we did go. But this was a big change. So here we are going to church on Wednesday nights, Saturday nights, and Sundays. And that was another kind of uh, immersion into a world that I had never been exposed to. People speaking in tongues and women fainting in the aisle. People with their hands in the air. And casting demons out and healings and all of these things and none of that was explained to me. My mother didn't prepare us for it. We just went to church and were just completely plopped into this very different situation that we had never been exposed to.
Can I
But
just
then, yeah, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you, Peggy. So this church. So how I see a church is people go to church, they sit there, they study the Bible. In England, you got obviously it's different in America, but in
Yeah.
England, you go to church, you'll study the Bible. You'll have a vicar or a priest, but it's not glorified. It's not like praise the Lord and all. None of that. It's very like humble and you study and you listen and you pray. It's very there's no ego involved in it. All the glory
And
goes to
that's what I had been exposed to up to that point. This was
yeah,
the first time, the church, what you're describing is what you go to church and you
yeah,
sing some hymns, and then there's a sermon. The kids go to Sunday school. It's
mm,
all everybody's got their suits and their best dress
yeah,
on. This was, hippies with no shoes on, and mothers sitting on the floor breastfeeding their kids. And like I said, dance trains going around. There was a band on the stage. It was just very, very different from what
Um,
I had been exposed to.
and what age are you when all this is happening?
So by that point, I was about 9 or 10.
She, so you can't
Yeah.
really challenge it because you sort of like you're a bit, what is
No.
this? But you're the
Yeah.
kid. You think, well, they know what they're doing. They're adults.
Right. They're
So
adults. Exactly. And my sister and I just followed my mother's lead, so, whatever she did, we did. So if she joined the dance train, we danced, joined the dance train. But then my mother had a falling out
mm,
with the minister there at that church. Apparently, he had told her he didn't want her dating. And, she was very angry by that and said, nobody's going to tell me what to do. And we're not going to go back to that church again. So then, this man that she was involved with, she told us that she married him, but later we found out that that wasn't true, that they didn't get married, that it was a marriage of God, of God, but
mm,
that they didn't legally get married. So he put a lot of ideas in her head. And so for your listeners, who've never really been involved in a cult or really know about a cult, from my experience, it's not like it's just one day they wake up and they go, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna start a group and I'm gonna be the leader." It's a gradual kind of um, process that happens over time, and that's the way it was with my mother. So then she had a falling out with the man. His name was Buddy, who convinced her that she had some special calling, or the two of them had a special calling. And when they had their falling out, we were left in financial ruins. And so then my mother decided, well, we're going to have to move back to Pennsylvania and move in with my grandparents because we had no money. She lost her job. Our living situation was gone. And so we ended up moving in with my grandparents, which was uh, not a good situation. They didn't have a good relationship. And my grandfather, who we called Pappy, he was fanatically religious and always talked about starting a church. And originally they were going to connect and start a church together, but then they found out they had fundamentally different ideas of what the Bible meant and what the preachings of Jesus were. And so they had a falling out, and they actually kicked us out of the house. So we had to then find somewhere to go, which we did. My mother always, she's like a cat. She always landed on her feet some in one way, shape, or form. But after that was then when my mom decided, okay, I have I have to go out and save as many souls as possible. And she told my sister and I that the end of the world was coming in 3.5 years, like predicted in the book of Revelation, and that she was one of the two witnesses that were going to be killed in the streets, and that would set off the end of times. So I was terrified. I was terrified that, I was going to be one of the people that wasn't taken to heaven in 3.5 years when the end of times came. But then what came next was traveling from place to place. Um, my mother bringing people into the group. It was a revolving door, though.
mm,
My mother expected complete compliance from people who came into the group, devotees. And if someone wasn't compliant, she would kick them out. Or sometimes they would leave on their own volition. They would think, this is crazy, I'm out of here, kind of thing. So it never really grew to the size that she had hoped. And after about 4 years of this, moving around from place to place, we'd settle in for a while and then we'd move, and then we'd settle in for a while and then we'd move. And she would bring people home. We would street preach to try to get people to come into the group. So that all went on for about 4 years, and there were many horrific things that went on during that 4 year period. I mean, at one point, we were at someone's home, and her family showed up because they heard that she was going to come with us and leave her family, because that was one of the things my mother expected was, if you come, you're part of our group, you abandon everything,
yeah.
your family, your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, if they don't want to come to, just like was expected of the apostles.
Yeah, it's dissociation, don't they? It's disfellowship and all that. So
Hmm.
you know, you said your mum would bring people home. What did that look
Hmm.
like? So she'd go out and preach this gospel,
Hmm. Hmm.
How would she approach them? Would she just use text from the Bible verses and say about
She would stand
Armageddon?
on the street and, yep, she would stand on the street and read the Bible. And her catchphrase was, Jesus is coming. Are you ready?
Right.
And so when she sent us out on the streets to bring people home, that's what we were supposed to say. And so what I would do is I would say it when people, others in the group were around, but then when I was on my own, we were paired off. So sometimes it was my sister and I, or I'd be paired off with someone else. Um, when we were paired off and we weren't being seen, we wouldn't do it. We would just
Yeah.
sit on the curb and just kind of rest. But that's how it would go. And then people would come home, and my mother was a fabulous cook. And so she would bring people home and we'd make a big meal. We'd, break bread together, have this big meal, and then we'd retire to the living room. And then that's when the sermon would start for my mom to try to convert the people. And they would get hooked. She had a different message. Her message was all the things you've been taught about sin are wrong. Smoking cigarettes isn't a sin. Sex before marriage isn't a sin. Drinking is not a sin. What is sin is hate in the heart, not taking care of the poor and the meek, um, those kinds of things. And so people would get very hooked by that, that especially if they were brought up with a very strict religion, that was very intriguing to them. But it wouldn't stay rainbows and sunshine for very long. It would turn because what she expected of people was to be perfect. There's a verse in the Bible that says, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And my mother latched onto that. And so she expected perfection. You had to have a pure heart, perfect thoughts, and no sin at all. And so once it turned, then it would get very dark for people. And so then it was time to cast demons out. And uh, casting demons out could get pretty graphic.
So big.
My mom would, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Peggy, because there's a lot of information you're giving. It's
Yeah.
great, but I'm thinking, right. So let's slow it down a little bit. Right.
Okay.
So your mum's doing all this. She's hypnotized basically, right?
Yeah.
Mind control. You can tell because the way she's acting. It's not rational.
Yeah.
She's not thinking. Because if she thinks that she's just and the reason why, because she's latching onto something because she's insecure. So she's found something
Right.
that gives her identity purpose, right?
That's right.
Like you know about this anyway. So then
That's right.
she's doing all this. She's promoting God, or this, not God, but this cult like. Now who are these type of characters that she's bringing back home? Because she's approaching strangers. Are they lovely little people, or are they drug addicts? Who are they? Are they?
No, they were lovely people.
Yeah,
Most of them were, and they weren't unintelligent people.
yeah.
So we only really had, there was one very mentally ill man that came in, and that's a memory that I have. She kicked him out because he was challenging her. Anybody who challenged her too much got kicked out. And then the police came to our door after he got kicked out, like maybe a few hours later, and said he was crawling backwards down the street trying to rewind time. So, but
Yeah.
he was an anomaly. He was different. My mother usually didn't bring home mentally ill people. It was usually
Right.
people of sound mind.
So she
But
was
what they
selective. She wouldn't just grab anyone.
yes,
Right. Okay.
yes. But what they did have in common was they were all searching for something.
Oh, cool.
They
Yeah.
were all feeling lost in the world, like, they just didn't feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And so that's why, and what my mother was promising was eternal life. You give up your life for Jesus, and in 3.5 years, when the end of times comes and he comes back, you're going to be saved and you're going to have eternal life. She was very big on eternal life. So she talked a lot about eternal life. So that was what she was selling.
Mm,
And people would buy that. They
yeah.
bought it, initially. But then once things would turn dark, um, it was a different story. So I'll give you an example. One woman came into our group and she had a 2-year-old,
Mm,
and she was in the middle of potty training. And my mother believed that a child should be potty trained. She always said we were potty trained at 9 months old, which I know is not true. Now, I guess I believed that before I had kids, but once I had kids, I was like, there's no way I was potty trained at 9 months. But anyway, she believed that this little 2 year old possessed the demon of stubbornness because she would not go on the potty. And the way that she was trying to exorcise that demon from her was by spanking her repeatedly to the point of her having a black and blue bum chronically. And that was probably of all of the things that I was exposed to. And we were held at gunpoint in one situation. There was an attempt on my mother's life in one situation. So there were a lot of things that went on during that 4 years when we were traveling around saving people. But the hardest for me was witnessing the child abuse.
Right.
I wanted to just grab these
Right.
kids and run, and I couldn't do anything.
Right. We're gonna have to edit that bit out. Okay.
Oh,
It's okay. I'll have to just edit it out. When you refer, I'm just gonna. So when I do this video, I'll just beep that bit. Okay. Certain
okay,
words we can't say. Okay.
okay,
If you're gonna say that, just say CA. So you know what it
okay.
means.
CA. Okay,
CA. Okay.
okay, got
So
it.
you can talk about it, but just because
Okay,
obviously
can't say the
YouTube won't
word.
like that. Yeah. So
Okay,
let's rewind it. What I'm going to try and do with you, Peggy, is what we do. I want to slow it down a little bit because you're giving so much information, which is really good. Right? You've just told me that someone had a gun to you. What's
mm-hmm.
that? So can you? I've got a few questions I want to ask you, and I know that we're probably not going to get through all this, right? But we'll have to do
Yeah.
another part, okay? But it's better that you tell the full story. Obviously, a book's going to be more descriptive because it's written
Yes.
words. So I've got a few questions, like like your family, like uncles, grandma, granddad, friends of your parents, aren't they getting involved, saying what's going on? Isn't there anyone sort of supervising this, saying what you're doing and look after the little?
No.
There's no one to.
No, no one. I mean, I think because we were so transient, we moved around a lot, and I should also add that my mother took my sister and I out of school,
Yeah.
so I never went to high school, and she just said, "Well, you're just going to have to tell people you're 16 and 17 because it's legal to drop out of school at that age." And
Right.
so I was 16 for 4 years, and I think because we moved around a lot, um, you know, people just didn't question. And my mother also trained us that if anybody asks you questions, you tell them it's none of your business. So if somebody would come up to me and ask me a question, I'd say, "I'm sorry, that's none of your business." That was what we were conditioned to say. So yeah, there was no oversight from friends or family or anything like that, and partly because my mother was very disconnected from her family.
Mm.
I mean, her parents kicked us out of their house. And so after that, there really wasn't much contact. So really, there wasn't any oversight. There was no one looking out for my sister and I. My son said to me at one point years ago, as I was telling him one of the stories from my childhood, he said, did your mom ever think about how vulnerable she made you girls
Mm.
to, men and things like that? And I was like, wow, yeah, that's a really good observation, because there were people coming in and out of our house all the time, many men coming in and out of our house all the time. And so, fortunately, nothing bad happened to us, but it could have. So yeah, there wasn't oversight. There wasn't anybody checking in on us or anything like that. But the held at gunpoint situation was um, a convert that my mother was trying to get, and this family was trying to stop that woman from going with us. And so they showed up with shotguns and held us at gunpoint, trying to get us to leave. And so, uh, you know, being held at gunpoint, boy, is not what you think it's going to be. In the movies, everybody's it's chaos and people screaming and all of this. It wasn't like that at all. We were all just kind of frozen. I just stood there, in this sort of dissociated state, not knowing what to do. Um, but, I look back on it now and realize how traumatizing that was, to me and everybody else involved. And actually that same day was when there was the attempt on my mother's life. This woman um, choked my mom to the point where she passed out. And as I guess I was about 11 years old at the time, 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old, I leapt on this woman and clawed her off of my mother. And I was terrified that I was going to be in trouble because my mother instructed us to not intervene if there was an attempt on her life, because the attempt on her life would be the beginning of setting off the end of times. And so we weren't supposed to interfere with God's will. So I was terrified of that. But later I learned that my mother didn't even know it was me that was the one who pulled this woman off of my mother, because she had passed out from being strangled. So it just a lot of crazy things that no child should ever be exposed to. It all became um, normalized to me. It was just like, what's the next thing that's going to happen? And it was just trauma after trauma after trauma during those years. But go ahead.
Sorry, I've got lots of questions. Um,
Yeah,
there's literally no one that because you're a little girl, you're not a teenager,
yeah,
you're a kid, little girl. There's n-
right.
I know you think that, well, this is normal, but it's not comfortable. It doesn't feel,
No, not at
this is
all.
not uneasy. So people watching it will say, well, why didn't you speak to an adult? But and I get it, because they didn't experience it. To you, it's normal. So okay, I'll just go with the flow, even though I'm not happy about it. I don't like it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. But can I ask? Was not at one point social services come in, or anyone, an
No,
adult, just to say, "Are you all right, love?" and sort of put their arm around you or talk to you, or
no,
no, never. And you didn't have any
no.
inkling to speak to someone and say, "Help me, get me out of this."
Well, there was no one to speak to. I mean, at that point, my mother had pulled us from school, so there
Yeah.
was no teacher or principal to go to. Um, and, on the outside, we looked like a normal blue collar family. My mother would be friendly with the neighbors. She was always outside doing yard work and things like that. She was very good at beautifying things. And she would, make food and take it to the neighbors and things like that. So there was no one for me to go to. And additionally, once I became immersed and believed, because at one point I didn't believe anything and I thought, well, this is crazy stuff.
Mm.
But I was so afraid because on the one hand, if you are perfect and pure and part of the group, you're going to have eternal life. If you're not, you're going to go to the lake of fire and you're going to burn for eternity. So I had nightmares about that, about being in this lake of fire and, feeling the heat on my body and seeing all these people burning alive and flailing around. And so I was terrified of that. So there's something called Pascal's wager. I don't know if you've ever heard of that,
No.
but it was developed in the 1700s by Basil Pascal. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but the concept is that you make this deal that you believe in God because it would be worse for you if you didn't. So at one point, I gave in and I said, I'm just going to believe everything because that's the safer bet. Because what if she's right and the end of times is coming, and all of the people who are not saved are going to go to the lake of fire? And that was the worst thing I could imagine, was going to the lake of fire. So I gave over my mind, my soul, everything to these beliefs that my mother taught me. And one of them was that she could read minds. She told people she could raise people from the dead, that she could heal the sick, that she could read minds, that she could cast demons out. And so going to someone else would be a sin. And that could be toss me into the lake of fire, because it's doubting and it's going against her. She used to say a lot, you're either for me or against me. And there was no middle ground. And so I did not want to be on the side of being against her. I wanted to be on the side of being for her, because being for her meant eternal life and not the lake of fire. And to be honest, I didn't care about eternal life at all. that I couldn't even, the concept of that was not even available to me. But the concept of the lake of fire, yes, I got that and I did not want to go there. So that was the thing that hooked me into forcing myself to believe what she was teaching, even though in my gut, all the truth was there, all the answers were there. I forced myself in my mind to believe what she was saying because I was so afraid of going against her and being tossed in the lake of fire. And in addition to the lake of fire, I was also fearful of being put in the hot seat. So if she sensed that somebody was doubting, or she believed that she read somebody's mind and they had a doubtful thought or an evil thought, you were going to get put in the hot seat and you were going to get interrogated until you repented. And
Yeah.
that could go on for hours and hours. And I did whatever I could to avoid being put in the hot seat. And that meant being completely compliant.
So, Peggy, what looking back now, so if me and you sort of separate ourselves as human beings and sort of look at your mum's behaviour, not emotionally, like oh that's my mother, just as a person, what would you say is encouraging her belief system? Because it's delusional, isn't it? But she believes
Yes.
it. She believes that
Yes.
she's God complex, right?
Yes.
What would you suggest would be the thing that's actually encouraging that belief? Because why is a rational mind not kicking in? It seems to be getting like now she's saying she's reading minds and she can bring people back
And
from
she
the dead.
also said that she was Jesus Christ come in the flesh. That came later. Yeah, that she believed she was Jesus Christ.
So would you say,
Hmm.
looking back, your mum's definitely got some sort of mental health, or
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, I would say that she has narcissistic personality disorder. And also depression, alcoholism. And that's another thing I should mention is
mm,
after the traveling around for 4 years, we settled in Iowa, and she said that the Lord told her that there were no more souls to save, and that we were supposed to basically hunker down and wait for His return, for Jesus to return, and for the end of times to come. So we settled in this little town in Iowa, and she told us that it was time for us to find mates and to produce offspring. And so that's exactly what we did. We all got married and had kids. And so then that's why the title of the book is Surviving the Family Kingdom, is because this eventually became a little tiny family cult. So all the things that went on during that 4 years, her traveling around, saving souls, the revolving door, people coming in and out, eventually everybody was gone. She would either kick them out or they would leave on their own, and it just became our family. But it was she controlled everything we did. I mean, even to the point of she wouldn't even allow my husband and I at the time to have a door on our bedroom. She never explained why. She just said it's the Lord's will that you don't have a door on your bedroom. So we lived without a door on our bedroom. So she controlled everything we did, where we worked, what we did, who we saw. I mean, and the other thing to mention is, if somebody's thinking, well, why didn't you tell somebody? I was very isolated, taken out of school, didn't have friends, didn't have extended family, and there was really, at that point, really no roots anywhere because we had moved around so much. And even once we established ourselves in this small town in Iowa, uh,
your signal's breaking up a little bit there, Peggy. Uh, Peggy, connection's going a little bit. Okay, I don't know if you can hear me, Peggy, but your signal's just froze a little bit. Okay, let's just come. We'll just wait for Peggy's signal to come back. If you can hear me, Peggy, your signal's just freezing a little bit. Okay, I can still see it sort of buffering, and there's no sound. I'll let you know as soon as it's working again because I can still see you, even though on this camera you can't. So this is crazy, isn't it? There's lots of questions I wanna ask you about this. I hope it doesn't lose signal. But obviously that's what's happening. That's a bit strange, isn't it? That's never happened before.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. You're back. Okay, right. Can I just ask you a couple of
Oh, it seems
questions?
okay now.
You're
Yeah.
all right now. What's going on
Yeah.
there? Right. Okay,
Yeah.
she's back. Right. So let me ask you a couple of questions, Peg. You don't mind, do you, Peggy, if I ask you some questions?
No,
It's good.
not
This.
at all.
What we're doing, we're putting light on it. We're talking about it, and that's a good thing, isn't it?
Mhm.
I'm just conscious of the time. Did you say you've got an hour and 10 minutes with us? And it's 50 minutes now.
Yeah, I need to leave about 2:40. Yeah, I need to leave about 2:40.
And what
So
time is
we're
it
we're good.
now there?
2:19.
Right, okay, 20 minutes. All right. All right, there's so much to go. We're not even scratched the surface yet. Okay,
Yeah.
right. If we don't get through it all, we can just do part two, can't we?
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
absolutely.
Because I really want to get into
Hmm.
this. So, right, so your mum said to you, right, going up, you go and you go get married, go find a relationship, right? Where, however she
Hmm.
phrased it. How old were you when this happened? When you started courting or entering into a relationship?
Yeah, I was about, well, when I started looking, I was about 17.
All right,
So and my mother never really thought of me as a teenager or my sister and I. We were adults. I mean, we overnight we were adults. So when I've told friends about not going to high school, they'll say, "Well, oh, were you homeschooled?" And I say, "No, wasn't homeschooled. There was no schooling at all. We didn't have books in the house. The only book we read was the Bible." And what my sister and I did during that time that everybody else was in high school, we worked. My mother went out and scrounged up jobs for us, cleaning houses, mowing lawns, pulling weeds, painting houses, whatever. That's what we did. And it full time. So it wasn't like just little jobs here and there. So she thought of us as adults. And so when we settled in Iowa and she said, okay, we're supposed to just um, um, stay here and wait for the end of times because the 3.5 years had come and gone, obviously. And so there was no second coming. And so she said, at this point, he's going to come like a thief in the night, and we just need to be ready. But we're supposed to mate and produce offspring. So yeah, so that message was given to me around when I was around 17. And so I dated a few men, and the question would appear in my mind after a couple of dates, is this my soulmate? Is this, the person I'm supposed to be with? And the other thing I should say is my mother was really big on predestination. She really preached everything's predestined. Everything that happens is supposed to happen. And so I just believed that I was just supposed to go along with whatever happened, bad or good. And so if a man came into my life, I thought, well, this man is supposed to be in my life because everything is predestined. If it didn't work out, well, it wasn't supposed to work out because that was predestined. So I did eventually meet my children's father, and we had our first child very quickly. In fact, I was pregnant when we got married. And then I got pregnant again with the second child soon after the first child. And it was when I was 21 that I opened my eyes to allowing the truth to come to the surface because the truth was always there. I always knew this was wrong. I always knew what she was telling, that she couldn't raise people from the dead. She couldn't, read minds. She once we settled into this little town in Iowa, she told us that the Lord told her we were supposed to blend in, and we were supposed to start smoking cigarettes and drinking. Back then, everybody smoked cigarettes. So that permission was given to my mom, and she always liked to drink. She did give it up during what she calls her ministry. During that 4 years, she gave up drinking and smoking, but she picked it up again. But she had drank and smoked before that she had her quote unquote calling. So a lot of the sermons that she gave, she was drunk. And the more she drank through the night, the more intense it would get. And there was no, thought of anybody having to get up early in the morning or no thought about how anybody felt. She would just go on and on and on for hours. And, she imagined things like she believed that the pain that she had in her body was a sign that there was sin in the family. So if she had an achy back or her legs hurt, we would be called together. Somebody would be put in the hot seat because she said, they doubted or they had a sin or an evil thought. and we would be up for hours and hours, her interrogating and trying to get a confession from whoever was in the hot seat. So it was just crazy stuff. And she also traveled back and forth between Pennsylvania and Iowa quite a few times in search of a man. It was actually the man who she had the baby boy with that she gave up for adoption. They reunited, and he was actually part of the kingdom for a while, but she was rough on him as well. So he was in the hot seat quite often, and he left her a few times. And when he would leave her, she would jump in the car, pack up, and go back to Pennsylvania to try to win him back. And she did win him back a couple of times, and then eventually she didn't win him back. But even when she was back in Pennsylvania, she still controlled us. She would call on the phone and she'd say, my legs are hurting. Somebody's backslidden. She would, tell us we would have to get together and figure out who it was to give her relief.
So, this was there ever a point in your life that your eyes started to roll, thinking, "Oh, she's doing me head in now," because I can sort of see through the bull crap, the bullshit type of thing. Was there ever a point? Because you're getting older now, you're thinking, "Oh God, it's the same record repeating
Yes.
now," so it loses its
Yes.
fear factor, and you're getting older. But again, you can understand when
Yes.
you're a little girl, you're controlled by fear. But again, because it's constant repetition of, it's going straight into your unconscious mind. So how do
Yes.
you separate? And when you did separate it, think, wait a minute, I'm supposed to suss this out now. You're full of shit, basically. What
Yeah. Yeah.
when did them seeds of realization start to form in your brain?
That's a great question. So to answer your first question, yes, there was some like internal eye rolls
Mm.
that went on for me a lot. But what would happen is because I believed that she could read my mind and I was so afraid, I would have these thoughts like, how could you be Jesus? You're a mess. I mean, things like that. And I would just push them out of my mind, and sometimes I would just drown them out by saying, praise Jesus, praise Jesus, praise Jesus, in my mind over and over, because I was so afraid that she would read my mind. But if I covered it up with, praise Jesus, and then it would be, she wouldn't hear it. But you're right. As I got older, and especially once I became a mother, witnessing what I did with what she did with children, I was afraid that that would happen to my children, and I was not going to let that happen to my children. And so I started to have sort of some soft rebellions. For example, she told me that I didn't need to childproof the house because I needed to teach my little boy that what he could touch and what he could, couldn't. And so I did that at first. And she said, well, if he touches something, you just slap his hand. And so I didn't childproof the house, and my little boy started walking, holding onto furniture and walking around. And he reached for something that he shouldn't have, and I hit the back of his hand. That's the only time I ever hit any of my kids. That was one and done kind of deal. So I slapped him on the back of the hand, and he turned around and hit me on my leg as hard as he could. And I said to myself, "Oh my goodness, I just taught my child to hit." So when my husband got home from work that day, I said, "I don't care what mom said. We're going to childproof the house and we're going to do it today. You need to go to the hardware store and get everything." And he was on board with that. And so that was my first real rebellion. And shockingly, when I told her on the phone what I'd done, she said, "Oh, well, you're his mom. You can make that decision," which I was shocked by. I couldn't believe, because I thought, well, all this time she's controlled everything. But when I look back on it now, I realized she was so distracted with being back in Pennsylvania and trying to win her man back and all of that, that it deflated a lot of her, control over us. But that was my first rebellion. And then there were little ones like that as time went on, where I just kind of asserted myself with regard to my kids.
Mm.
And what the breaking point was, we had her come back for Christmas, and I was pregnant with my second child, and I was very overdue. And I didn't know this at the time, but now I understand, looking back through a therapeutic lens, that I was giving my mother one last chance to show me that she loved me and that she saw me as a daughter and not just a convert of the kingdom. So I asked her if she would stay and be with me for the birth. And she said no. She said she had to get back because she missed her friends. Now, that may sound like an innocuous phrase to anyone listening, but to me, that was the tipping point. The way I describe it in my book is it's like I had a shelf with all these things stacked on it. And I did whatever I could for all those years to keep that shelf steadied. Every once in a while, something would be on the shelf that would almost make it come crashing down, but I would steady it, by controlling my mind or, doing something. You've probably heard of fight, freeze, or fawn as a traumatic response, a trauma response. I did a lot of fawning. And so, I was very wanted to please my mom. So I became a people pleaser and just did everything she asked and more because I was so terrified of going to the lake of fire or falling out of her graces. So um, that phrase is what toppled that shelf that came crashing down. And in that moment, I thought, wait a minute, you miss your friends? I thought you were Jesus. I thought we were preparing for the end of times. I'm your daughter. Why don't you want to be with me? It just everything came crashing down. And in that moment, I decided I was going to let my mind open and I was going to think whatever I wanted to think. And I did. I laid in bed awake that night, just all the memories rushing back, allowing myself to think all the things that I had stuffed down in here that I knew was the truth. I let that all come to the surface and think about it. And so when my husband woke up in the morning, I said, I'm leaving the kingdom with or without you. Now, fortunately, he said he wanted to leave too. So we ended up leaving together. And it was like a domino effect. Once I told the rest of the family, they all decided they wanted to leave too. So it was like a little bit like a coup. And I started it. And one of the reasons I could do that was my mother had left and she went back to Pennsylvania. And I didn't have the fear of her being there and manipulating me into going back into submission. So that was the tipping point for me. I was 21 years old.
Right. So we're gonna go back a little bit, if that's all right. So
Sure.
you said about your mum had a partner, and she used to do this thing called the hot. Was it the hot seat? Is that what
Yeah.
right? So this is
Hmm.
like, oh, this is the hot seat. You've been warned. I'll put you on the hot seat, right? What's this hot
Hmm.
seat that she does to you and your sister and anyone who sorts of challenges her? What does that look like? This hot seat?
Yeah. So you could be put in the hot seat if she believed that you had an evil thought or a doubtful thought, or if you verbally challenged her in some way, or it could be that she thought you took on a demon. So, and it could be the demon of laziness, it could be the demon of stubbornness, it could be the demon of lust. I mean, there are a whole demon of hatred. There could be there was a whole host of demons that she believed that people would take on. And so if she believed that you had any of those infractions, we would she called it getting together. We would get together in the living room and that person would be interrogated. And so she would tear them down, ask them questions, um, tell them that they did certain things, even if they didn't. And sometimes people, it's a little bit like, when the police take someone in and interrogate them for hours and hours and hours, eventually they just say, okay, I did it because they want the interrogation to end. So there was a lot of that went on, where people would just say, okay, fine, I did it, I confess. And then the night would finally end. So it was, and sometimes in those situations, if someone didn't confess or repent and comply, she would kick them out. And or sometimes they would be punished. They would be told that they would have to fast or isolate to their room. One time, there was a man who confessed to doing something in the bedroom with his girlfriend that she deemed a sin, and he was exiled to sleep in the garage. And this was when we lived out on a farm, and the garage was, this big, huge thing that could hold tractors and things like that. And it was in the middle of fall, so it wasn't warm. And so when I witnessed things like that, I didn't want to be exiled to the garage. I didn't want to be forced to fast. I didn't want to be, forced to isolate or being kicked out. And I didn't think just because I was her daughter that I was immune to any of that. And so those kinds of, it's called third party abuse. When you witness someone suffering abuse, it's like you take it on yourself, and your body reacts and your brain reacts just as if you're going through it.
So she didn't treat you like a daughter at all. You were
No,
below her, like you were like everyone else. Do as I
that's right.
say, not as I do, type of thing. And do you know these
Hmm.
people? She's treating people. She's controlling all these people. And
Hmm.
what is it that's making them obedient to her? Because if someone spoke to me like that, I say get lost. But these people are like okay, and they're 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 allowing her to treat them like that. So what is it about these people? What she got over them? Why can't they
Hmm.
just say I'm not playing this silly game? She's got some
I
sort of
mean, some did. Some did, eventually some did would say, this is, I'm out of here. But the ones who didn't, I think the same as me. They feared damnation. They feared, that she was right, that she was the chosen one,
mm,
and that if they went against her, they would, go to hell or go to the lake of fire or, have a life of torment. And she would tell them that, that if you leave here, you're going to have a life of torment.
mm,
So, and the other thing for listeners to understand is that brainwashing is systematic. It doesn't happen overnight. And the brainwashing starts with the rainbows and sunshine. It starts with the good stuff. It starts with the lovely sermons where, she's talking about how Jesus saved Mary Magdalene, and, how he treated the poor and the meek, and, how he turned, the fish and the bread, into a multitude of fish and bread, all of those kinds of
yeah,
things, those really lovely stories. And so people are enthralled. And also, this was in the 70s. This was when this kind of thing was rampant.
mm,
There were religious cults all over the place. I mean, this was during the time of Jim Jones and the Moonies, and I
yeah,
mean, it was very common for people to get involved in these kinds of things. And so, like I said, it's systematic. It's, rainbows and sunshine in the beginning. And the other thing is, my mother was very nurturing. So there was, lots of great food. When people would come, there were hugs and kisses, there was praise, so all of that was in the beginning, but the tearing down then came later. And
right,
so people would buy this stuff hook, line, and sinker. And so then when it came time that they were in the hot seat, of course they're defensive. They want to be part of the group. They don't want to be exiled. They don't want to be kicked out. They don't want to be seen as sinners, as someone who's not going to reap the benefits that she's promising. And so, but for me at 21, I just realized all of it was madness, and all the things I knew to be true and I knew that were wrong. What she did to children. How she destroyed people's lives, tearing families apart. Insisting that people give up their entire lives and come with her. I just knew it was all wrong, but I didn't allow myself to believe it until that moment when she said, "I want to get back to my friends."
right. I'm conscious of the time. I can talk to you for hours, but I
Yeah,
know you've got to go in a couple of minutes, literally, haven't you?
yeah,
That's right, isn't it? Right. So there's a lot more. We've not even scratched the surface yet, have we? Really?
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
because before
We
you
can we can
mentioned
we can definitely do a part two.
we're going to have
Yeah,
to, because I know you mentioned essay, and I'm like, what? What's that? When you were talking about that. So we've not even talked
yeah,
about that bit yet. The only reason we haven't
right.
is because of time. Literally, you do have to go, but we're gonna get deeper into this, and then we'll go over everything you said and go a bit deeper, and then after
Okay.
you 21 as well, what happened next. But no, I really appreciate
Hmm.
that. Can you just stay on the call with me just for a minute? I'll just wrap this up.
Sure.
Only again,
Okay.
this is only because you have to go. I'll talk to you all
Yeah.
night. But no, really appreciate that. Thank you. And we're gonna get a part two. There's probably gonna be a part three as well.
There
I
might
said
be.
this to you before we recorded. I says we'll end up going deeper into this. We'll end up doing
Yeah.
part two, didn't I? Because there's always more to it. That's why you've written
Yeah.
the book. So just to let people know, you've got a book about this. It goes
Yes.
really into detail with this.
Yes.
Can you just clarify again what the book's called?
Sure. It's Surviving the Family Kingdom. And right now it's available on Amazon, or you can go to my website and order from there. And you could also download the first 4 chapters for free from my website. And the website is my name. It's peggyshar.com, Peggysharr, 2 R's, .com. So the book can be ordered there. You can also download the four free chapters, or you can go to Amazon and get the ebook or the paperback.
That's great. Thank you very much. Again, we're only cutting this short because Peggy has to go. Because there's a lot of questions, and I know people listening to this, they'll think, "Well, talk about that bit," and say, "Don't worry,
Yeah.
we're going to just have to do it on another day, hopefully very soon." So let me just say goodbye to everyone. Just stay with me, but thank you for that, Peggy. Really
Thank
appreciate
you
you
for
sharing
having
that
me.
story. You're very brave. The truth always outwits the devil, doesn't it? The light's always more
Yeah.
powerful than the darkness, and there you go. Your evidence of that. This is interesting. Again, I didn't know what Peggy was gonna say. I thought, oh, okay, I sort of get a gist of it. Okay, a cult. Okay, but I didn't know how impactful it was, and what that people can buy into it. I know that you say, oh, it was back in the 70s, it was different then. I'm like, but things like that still go on today, don't they? It's still happening right now as we speak.
Yes.
But you just don't hear
Yes.
about it. It's gone underground. But by Peggy sharing a story, it's shedding light onto it. So really appreciate that. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. We're going to do a part 2. It's going to be on straight after this as well. So click on that one and you'll see what else Peggy's got to say, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more descriptive details about it. But until next time, guys, take care, look after yourself, and wake up before you end up being trapped in a cult before you know it.